Hi, welcome back to my farmhouse sewing room. Are you ready for part 2 of the bunny bag drawstring backpack? I got all the pieces ready and I'm ready to get started on the fun stuff. So I've got my D-ring tabs. We're going to sew these on both sides. We'll get that started. We'll sew the hanger tab. The casing pockets, I've pressed them in half and I folded over the edges a half an inch so we won't have any raw edges on the ends for the top. But we're just gonna sew these down and then just leave them folded in half, so we'll have that prepared, and we will work on this little star for the stomach. So let's get started. So I'm going to get started on sewing down each side of these long strips, which this is the hanger tab and these are the D-ring tabs, and I'm just going to close them up on both sides, the other side just to give it the nice double stitching on each side. And then the long casing ones, I'm just going to sew the hem on the inside so you don't see the raw edges. So we'll get started with that. And I want to sew as close to the edge as I can. We can see that both edges are stitched down really nice and make a nice clean little loop for the D-ring. So I will finish sewing up the rest of these and I'll meet you back here. Okay, I've got all my pieces sewed. I've sewed the inside ends of the casings. Now, I didn't fold these over twice. If you want to fold them over twice, you can, or you can zigzag them, but these are just inside of a casing, and I just did a stitch very close to the edge just to hem that inside edge inside. It's up to you how you really want to do it. I sewed my hanger tab, and I kind of crisscrossed mine over so it kind of hangs a little bit differently, but this is totally up to you. And I sewed it across the ends and attached it at the ends. I got my D-rings on my two little tabs. My D-rings are kind of tiny. These are 3/4 inch D-rings. Normally I like a 1 inch D-ring, but I'm out of those, so I'm using what I have. But as long as I can get my paracord in there and knot it, it's perfectly fine. So these are all ready to go, and these will be sewed into a seam, so you won't have to worry about the ends. And the same way with this will be sewed into a seam. So next I'm going to go for the ears. I hope you have your ears made. Mine are right sides together. This is just some chenille that I had that's old. It's from an old blanket. I just thought they would be really soft and make some cute little floppy ears to hang down on my bag. So we're going to get these sewed together, right sides together, and then we will flip them right sides out, and then we will attach our inner pink ear, I can't talk right, I'm sorry, and I will show you how to put the chenille around them and make them really look cool. Okay, so we'll get started on that. Okay, so I'm starting on the upper part of the ear, and you can do a 1/2 inch seam allowance like you normally do for sewing around these. So I'm just going to get started. when you sew these, you might need to flip the curves a little bit too, because when you turn them right side out, you don't want them to be all bunched up, so it kind of helps. If you need to use scissors to clip them, or you can use pinking shears to go around them, that always helps too. I'll just get around my curves. This sewing machine is really great for letting me move my fabric around so I can turn it. I really love this new machine. And there's no need to backstitch because these are going to be sewed into a seam. And like I said, you can take some pinking shears and kind of go along, or you can just cut some little slits in the curves and we'll flip it right side out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll meet you back here. I don't know if clipping this chenille helps or not, but I'm going to do it anyway just to make sure it lays right. Okay, you can see that I've got my bunny ears sewed together, and these are the inner ear pieces, and you want them to lay them on there, and you want to be able to see some of the outside edge so it looks nice and neat. One thing I wanted to point out with putting this inner piece on, if you didn't want your stitches to show on the back side of your ear, you can always stitch this on the front piece before you put the front and back together, right sides together, and before you flip it, you can have the pink on there. It's all up to you. This is just really a quick show of what you can do, but I mean, the ideas are endless. So I'm going to get ready to put some chenille around my pink around here. Instead of doing an applique stitch, I'm just going to stitch it, and I'm going to put the chenille on there. This stuff is the blooming bias, which I told you could get it at Joann's, or it's called chenille from Etsy. And basically is what I'm going to do is I'm going to start it down here. Well, no, actually I'm going to start from the top. Sorry, bear with me. I'm going to edge this to the top, and I'm just going to put it in the middle of the edge all the way down, and then back up around. And it doesn't matter if it overlaps or anything, because this is all going to fray, and it's going to make this look really, really cute and fuzzy. And I'll just cut this off, and I will show you how we're going to get this on there. So I'm just going to kind of position it, and I want to make my stitch right in the middle of this blooming bias, because you want both sides of this to fray. And you can see it's already getting fuzzy, but it's just like a gauzy kind of like material, and I just want to sew it around the edge. So I'm going to get that started if you want to get along here with me. And this isn't, you don't have to do this. This is just something I thought would really give it a little more character. So I just want to give you the ideas of what you can do to make something really fun. And I want to apologize for the part 1 video. The voice was not great in that. And my poor camera recording equipment is not the greatest, but trying to do my best. I'm going to try to keep this in the middle and get this nice and straight. Okay, I want to get this around to the other side, so I want to, let's see, my foot, get it all the way up. I love this machine. It is amazing. It does amazing things. Okay, and I want to get back on track and get around the curves. Make sure I kind of have it centered. Okay, you can see that I've got this sewed around the edges, and if you just take a brush or your nail, which I'm really conscious of y'all watching me of how I do things because I'm trying to make this easy, but a stiff bristled brush would even be great. But this is going to cover up the raw edges, and as you see as I dig it, it's going to make this really fuzzy, like rabbit fuzz in the ear. And I want to try to get both edges on there because the more fuzzier it is, the more fun and realistic it looks. And it just makes it look really soft. And it's going to look really great on your bag. So I'm just trying to get it. So if you work at this, which I'm going to go off camera and work at this and I'll show you how fuzzy that it gets, but you can see it's already taking an effect. And we will do this with the other ear, and then these will be ready. And then we will get on to putting the star for the belly on, and I'll show you how that's done, okay? Okay guys, I laid out the ears and the pieces, so I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of a visual of what your bag is going to look like. So the little ears are going to hang down, and you can see the fuzz around the inner part of the ear really gives it that whimsical, cute effect for, you know, a little backpack. And of course the fluffy tail, and this is where your tabs are going to go. We're going to box this later, and I'll show you how to get to that, but your tab is going to be, your tab will be on the other side. And then your casings for your paracord, and we're going to put this on the belly side. So we're going to get started, and I'm going to walk you through on how to do these blocks. And remember, it's 9-inch block, or 9 blocks, 3 inches each. And I put a different block in the center, and then the points are 2-inch blocks, and I've folded them and pressed them, you know, so that they have these little shape. And then I put them on my little design board, and we're going to start with the points, and we're only going to do the inside of the point. So I'm going to take these outside ones off, because we're going to open this up where I have my press line, and I am going to sew down that press line just as they are on my blocks on here. And then when I get these sewed on, we'll cut off the back part and flip this over, and then we will go to the next star point. So if you want to follow me over to my sewing machine, I will walk you through on getting these points onto these little blocks and how we get them all sewed. So I wanted to explain my corners on these a little bit better. So I laid the bottom points out so they were in order in each corner. So they look kind of almost like a little star leg right now. So I've got, these are the first set of points that I'm going to sew down. I know it's a little confusing. And having this little design board, which is Lori Holt's idea, they work great. And this one's just a homemade one, but it holds my fabric on here, and it helps keep everything positioned, so when I put it in my sewing machine, I'm not sewing the wrong side. So I'm going to start with the top, and I'm going to open up my little 2-inch block, and you can see that I have a little press line down the middle. That press line, you don't want that press line in the corner of your block. You want it to be at the upper middle and the lower bottom here, just like it is. So I'm going to take this block, and I'm going to put it over to my machine, and I am going to sew down that press line. So let's see, we'll get this started. And to make this not confusing, I'm going to do them one at a time. Normally I would chain piece these, but as you can see, I've got this sewed down. And I'm going to take my scissors, or I can take my rotary cutter and just cut it a 1/4 inch away from that sewn line. But for now, I'm just going to lay this back on here, and I'm going to get all of these sewed down. And I will, when I'm done with them, I will show you how I cut them off, and then we will put the second star leg on because it's going to overlap the first one. Okay? So I've got these all sewed on. I'm just going to cut these back parts off with the rotary cutter. So this little part here that folds over, I want to keep that inside. I'm going to cut this back part off with so I'm just going to take my rotary cutter and just kind of cut that off. And then you fold that back over, and I will set it back on here where I had it positioned. So I'm going to do this with all 4 of these, and then we're going to get on to getting the other laying on. And I'm trying to make this as simple as I can without being too confusing. I do a lot of this stuff and I really don't even think about what I'm doing. I guess I've made these many times and they're just really fun. If you've seen my video with my quilt, I did the Scrappy Stars and I love it. I haven't gotten it finished yet, but I'm going to be working on that. So this here. Alright, so I'm going to take you back over, and now you can see I've got the other 2-inch squares, which they're folded with the press line. I'm going to lay them on here so I know where everything goes. And you can see this one goes this way. Your end point here is they're going to cross over each other. So now when I sew this down on the press line, I'll flip this open and I'll sew that down into the press line, and then I'll cut this other back part off. And then that will be your star legs. So let's get these. So the corners go into the corners, which make it pretty easy. So when you position these on there, I'm trying to keep everything together. Well, if I can keep my fingers from grabbing too much that I don't want to. So now you see that how the top ones all overlap the bottom one. And I will open them up and sew them down the crease line, and then we'll cut the backs off. Starting with the top one, I'm going to open it up and I'm going to sew it right down that press line. I'm going to want to make sure that they are nice and square on there so nothing gets wonkied. It might be a little off, but if you get a little off, don't worry, you know, it's not the end of the world. It'll get lost in seam allowance, I'm sure. And I want to try to chain piece these through if I can. I've heard it said many a times that close enough is good enough, so I don't really sweat the small things. There are no sewing police. If you don't like it, you know, the worst case scenario is you can take it out and redo it. But this is just a fun thing, and I really enjoy sewing, and I don't want to sweat if something isn't exactly perfect. This is one of my greatest enjoyments, and the main thing about making something like this is having fun with it. And then, you know, it makes a really nice gift for a little kid, and they're not going to notice all the little details of, you know, if something's not quite perfect. So don't sweat it. Just have fun. Okay, so now that I've got all my star legs sewed, I'm going to cut off the back side of the top star leg that we put on. So I'm just going to eyeball this, you know, as I've been doing, and just cut the backs off. And it probably wouldn't hurt to press these again so that they would be nice and flat. I'm going to go around the board, and I'm just going to cut these off and get them as straight as I can. This is just a really cool thing. I like to put a lot of little details in things that I sew just because it's fun, and it gives me a little practice too. I think the more you sew, the better you get. That's the way I've felt on doing everything that I do. You know, everything's trial and error, but I've made a lot of these, and they're just really fun to do. So now I've got my star legs all put together. Now it's time to get putting these little blocks together, and I'm just going to fold over the first block to the second one, and I am going to sew. I'm going to chain sew these through the machine, you know, 1/4 inch seam allowance down the side, and then we'll get the other side put on, and we'll get these blocks sewed together. Okay, so I'm going to try to get these lined up as close as I can. leave these sewed together. Figure out what I'm doing here. Open these up. Seam allowances the opposite way in my rows. And just finger press them open. That one there. Now, I am going to turn this around because I want to start from the top. I am a left to the right. I sew the opposite way normal people sew. I sew from the inside instead of the outside, so I try to keep things the way I know how to do it. So I'm going to try to get this put together. So do this the best way you know how. I just think it would be easier for me to keep these together. I'm going to chain piece them back through. My top kind of fell off there. I need to put this back on there and line it up the best way I can. Make sure everything is even. And then the last one. Okay, we got that on there. Alright. Now I've got my rows together. I want my seams to go. I got the bottom going to the right, the middle will be going to the left, and then the bottom, the top will go back to the right. So now when we sew the rows together, everything should nest so that your seams line up. So when I flip this over this way, let's see, this bottom, on the seams on the bottom here should be going up. These seams on the top will be going down. And they should line up together, and it makes everything line up, and the seams all line up. Which I've learned that from watching other people's YouTube tutorials. It does make things a lot easier and a lot neater. And it's so nice when your seams line up. Now, this seam underneath here wants to flip-flop around on me, so I'm going to try to keep that not flip-flopping, so my seams are all nest. It helps it lie flatter too. That one seems to be nested good, so now it seems like it's a little off. But when this is all sewed together, I can trim it. One more row. I think I gotta pinch just a little bit. So open that up. Fold this side over. The ones underneath should be down. And these ones should be up. So everything lines up, nested together best I can. Everything to lay down. Keep that seam up. Okay, I think I got it. So now when I open this up, my seams look like they all align with each other. And I will press this and I will trim it just to make sure it's the right, and then we'll see what the measurement of this block measures, and then I will cut the back side of my fabric to fit around this to make it the 12 by 14. So I just wanted to show you, I'm just going to trim up my block a little bit. My block measures about 7.5, but it's a little off in some edges, so I just kind of put it under my grid here, and I'm just going to trim off this little bit of excess just to make it a perfect 7.5-inch block, and you can see I don't have very much excess here, but there is my 7.5-inch block. So now I have to kind of do the math and figure out, okay, I've got my bag is an exact 12 inches wide and it's 14 inches long. So I am going to have about 2.5 inches on each side, but I'm going to make a 3-inch strip, on each side to fill up for my 12 inches wide, and then I will add my inches for the top and the bottom to make it 14 inches long. And if I have a little extra, we can always trim it off to fit the 12 by 14, but I want to incorporate this in one side of my bag. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the pieces for that, and then I will get back and we'll trim on down, and I'll show you how I did that. Okay guys, I got this crazy idea, and instead of cutting, have you ever been nervous? Instead of cutting, I'm going to position this in the middle of my back piece panel, and I'm going to stitch it down, and I'm going to chenille it just like I did the rabbit ears. I think this would be a lot easier than trying to cut up a back that I've already got cut. As I say, I mean, everything I do, I kind of wing it as I go, so just bear with me that you're along for this ride with me. I'm just trying to make it easy and not too confusing on how to put this together. I really don't want to make it difficult for you, but the ideas are endless. You can really do what you want. I'm just trying to give you a good idea on something that's fun. So I'm just putting in some pins here because I'm going to tack this thing down, and I'm going to stitch it down, and I am going to put this awesome chenille all the way around my square block. I just think that it would really be cool, and it would match these funky little ears that we've got done, and just make this bag really fun. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. Okay, so I've got things pinned together. I folded my main fabric in half, and I folded the casing piece in half, and I lined up the center fold press line so I could find the middle and pinned it down. I did the same thing, and with the tab that the hooky tab goes underneath the belly side of the bag, and I pinned it in the middle and pinned it down. And you can see the star block, I just laid it on top, I stitched it down, I put the chenille on it. This was much better idea than cutting the whole deal, so I don't want to make this too complicated for my first sew along. So, and I got the little tabby D-ring tabs put on, and I measured them 2.5 inches up from the bottom, and then I put them in pinned them in. So we can stay stitch all of this stuff so it stays in place, so when we get ready to sew the bag together. Also, I need to put the ears on. I need to put the ears on this side underneath this, so I'm going to have to tuck these. These are going to be just tucked right up underneath your raw edges to the top of your raw edge at your bag, and these will go right up underneath, because when this part is going to be folded up, so you want your ears kind of, I got my little middle press line here, so I'm just putting my ears up underneath here to meet up the raw edges, and want to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance on those to make sure that they're good and tucked in, which I don't want any of the, I want to make sure maybe they're out a little bit at the top, because I don't want the seam to show where I stopped with my chenille, so I could pull them up just a little bit more just to make sure that they're in there and that they're all the way up. So and they look pretty even on the bottom, so we can stay stitch all that before we get ready to sew this together. And I'm getting ready to cut up the bottom corners of my bags. I've already did the liner fabric. I did a 1.5 inch cutout on each end, and I'm getting ready to measure this out 1.5. I have this little grid ruler here. I measured it 1.5 inches in and 1.5 inches up with my marking pencil. I am just going to mark the square and cut this out, because this is the part where we're going to be boxing the bag, so it has a nice flat bottom, so when things sit inside it just makes it really nice. So I'm going to do that in each of the corners of the bag, and then cut them out, and then we will get ready to get this bag sewn together and see your finished product. I can keep this thing still. I want to make sure my lines are accurate. Accurate lines for cutting out your corners is important. So once we get this bag sewed together, the last part is to put in the paracord. And you're probably going to need 2 pieces approximately 50 inches long of the paracord to loop through the paracord channels and come down, and it attaches at your D-rings, and we just knot it off. Jim's pretty good at doing that for me because he's good at tying knots. So get this marked, and hopefully I have it right. Okay. And I probably should use my scissors for these. And I'm just going to cut my squares out for my box. Trying to make this not so complicated, but sometimes I think I complicate myself. But trying to teach all of you something that I do. I don't know if I'm that good at it. But you can decide. I'm just trying to make it simple without being too hard. Okay, so now I've got the corners all cut out. I'm going to stay stitch these down so everything stays in place when I put these pretty side to pretty, and then we're going to sew it together. I'll sew down the sides and I'll sew across the bottoms, and then we will get to the boxing part. In the same way with the liner, I'm going to do this the same way, sew it together. But on the side, I'm going to leave a pretty good hole on the side. Most people leave their hole on the bottom for flipping. I don't like the seam because I like to sew the seam with my sewing machine, so I do my seam on the side where it's less visible and it's easier to sew it shut, and it doesn't seem so obvious at the bottom of the bag. So I'm going to leave a good size hole here where I can pull everything through when we get ready to flip it. So I just marked my sides there, and I'll sew down to here and then sew here to here. Sew this whole side and I'll sew the bottom, and we'll get that done, okay? Okay, so I'm getting the best part of making this bag together. Right now I am just pinning everything. On the main part of the bag, I've stay stitched my casing for my paracord, and my tab is in there. My ears are underneath and they're all stay stitched in. The little D-ring tabs are all stay stitched in, and I've just pinned it all the way around because we're going to sew this down each side, and we're going to sew it across the bottom here, and then we're going to box these corners. So, and right now this is the lining, the padded lining, and I've made the little arrows here, or the little marks here where I want to leave that part open, and I'm just pinning this together, and I will do the same thing with this. I will stitch down each side, leaving this hole here open. I'll stitch it here, and we'll box this too as well. And we will wrap this up, and you will see what you have is a really beautiful and cute little bag that some little girl will enjoy, or a little boy. It depends on who you make it for, you know. I'm not biased. So I'm going to start with, I'll start with the lining. I'm going to sew it down, leave the hole open, sew it down, and this will be easiest to show you how to box these corners to make the bottom. So I'm going to get started. Okay, so I'm going to get started on sewing. Do my 1/4" seam and remove pins as I go because I don't want to run over them. And I'm just going to zip this down. And this is where my little blue line is, so I'm going to stitch down to that, and I'm going to stop it and lock it, cut it, bring it down to this marking. Remove my pin. And I am going to lock it at the end of these stitches, only because when we box this, I just don't want anything to come loose. So it'd just be best to do that. So that is the side with the open hole. So I've got a nice little hole here on that side for turning the bag when we get it together. And I'm going to just do the other side. Something's not right here. I come unthreaded. Okay, cut. I'm going to rethread my machine. Alright, back in business. Down the other side. I feel like that could be lined up just a little bit better, but okay, and now across the bottom. And we'll get to the fun part of boxing. So, sew across the short end. It's a lock stitch. Told you I'm an inside sewer, so I'm a little weird, but it gets the job done. So, we all have our quirks and ways to do things. Alright, now we're going to get to boxing these corners. Let me get that thread out of the way. Get rid of those. Okay, so now we've got this little open hole. I'm going to split it and I'm going to line it up seam to seam. So the bottom seam to the side seam should line up. And then I'm going to stitch it across. So it might be a good idea for me to kind of pin this so I can keep it in place, because you really want those seams to stay lined up. It just gives it a neater look, and by the looks of things they are pretty well aligned. So, and now I'm just going to sew across, get underneath the machine here. Because I've got it held in place. And with this quilted fabric, it does get a little bulky. Okay, so we've got it sewed across. In the same way with this side. Let me get my thumb in there. And I'm just going to line it up, get it shaken apart here, and you're just lining up this bottom seam with your side seam so they kind of line up. And I kind of like try to turn the seams a little bit so they kind of nested and it's in the middle. And then I'm going to pin it in the middle. Ah, don't mind me. Being single-handed is what I do. And I'm used to it, so... But I get the job done. So there, we got that one lined up. I'm going to put this under here. Oops, splitting here. And let's see, I get this to lay down and not get my finger in there. Don't want to sew my finger. I already did that once and it was not pleasant. So don't put your fingers too close and don't put your foot down too hard. You could sew your finger. Okay, do a little back stitch, and my friend, is how we box the corners. So now when I put this bag upright, you can see that it has a little bit of a bottom. So when this sits, it has a flat part inside so your stuff can sit down nicely. So I'm going to do the same thing with the outer panel, except I'm going to sew down each side and sew the bottom and then box the corners. And then this bag is really going to start to come to life. So, okay, we're in the home stretch of getting this cute little bag done. So I've got both the inside and the outside sewed all the way around. The bottoms are boxed. I got the outside. So now we're going to take the outside of the bag and we are going to turn it right side out. And this is where it really starts getting cute, because you're really going to see how this little bag is going to turn out for you. So you can see I got my little D-ring tabs on there. There might be a little loose strings on there that we might have to pluck off, but it looks pretty good. This is the back side with the chenille and everything, and you can see when the tabs come up, you'll have your hanger. The front side of the bag with your cute little ears all sewn in. So now I'm going to take the outside of the bag and I'm going to put it into the inside of the liner. So if I can get this stuffed in here, because once we get this tucked in here, we are going to sew all the way around the top, and that will finish off the edge. And when we finish sewing it all the way around the top, we're going to pull the outside of the bag through this little hole, and this inside here will turn right side out. So what I'm going to need to do is line up the seams. So you're going to want to line up the inside of your seams to the outside seams here. I know this seems kind of weird right now, but so we're going to line up our seams, and I'll probably put some clips on this to keep it all in place. And then we're going to sew all the way around the 1/4 inch, all the way around the top. So once I get this done, and then we're going to pull the outside of the bag through this hole, and then this will flip around and it will be able to fit back down in. And of course we can top stitch it all the way around and then close up our hole, and then we'll be ready to put in the paracord. Okay? Okay, so I have the sleeve part of my machine set up, and I've got my bag all nicely clipped around so I can hold it together. So I'm going to start at the seam, and I'm going to sew this around your 1/4 inch. So hopefully we can get started. Yep, and we're good to go. I want to try to keep everything nice and straight as I go along. We're sewing through several layers of fabric here, especially through the ears. And I want to try to keep this as straight as I can as I'm going around. Probably the most exciting part of getting this bag finished, because you're in the home stretch. And when we turn this right side out, you will see how really cute that this all comes together. I'm going to have some bulkiness here, but we can just get past all that. We're getting there. Thickness, almost there. All right. I'm going to finish off to stop. Just going to tie it off and cut. Okay, and I just want to trim this long piece of, yep, there's There's a long piece of thread there. I just can't hardly see it. So I just want to trim that off. I don't like all these extra threads hanging around. Okay, so now that I have this all sewed around, and I am going to pull it through my side hole here. So bear with me, this is how I do it. So I'm pulling the outside of my bag, and I'm going to try to turn the inside as well as it comes through this hole. It's because my inside is so thick. I'm trying to get it all flipped out. See, the ears are coming. And the rest of it. Okay, and my hole is big enough where I can get my hand in there, and I can kind of poke out my corners for the inside of my bag as well as the outside. I want to make sure everything is kind of pushed out and feels right. And that looks good. And now the inside of the bag should nicely tuck down to the inside of the outside of the bag, if that makes any sense. I just want to get this pushed in so you can see what it looks like, and then we can get it closed up and get some cording on here. So everything fits nicely inside. And like I said, in the beginning when we were cutting up the pieces, the inside you could make for pockets inside of this, whether you want to do a zip pocket or just an outside or a pocket that's straight across with little compartments. That's all fine. But this is the bag, and it's finished with the little ears, and we'll put the little bunny tail. You can use a little hot glue to put that on. The underside of the bag just has a nice matching design, which makes it really nice, and this little tab makes it really nice to hang it up. But we will put the cords through. You'll put one side through on this end and come out, and then we're going to knot it off, and then the other side will come through here and back and channel back through the back one and come down and tie in this D-ring. And when you draw it up, it'll give you some nice little handles to cinch up the top, and it's really great for a little kid to carry on their back. So stay tuned for the end of the video, and I'll have some pictures of the finished product so you can really see what it looks like. It's adorable. Thank you for watching.